Miver TRUF MB 1969. This is the documentation of the experience of a hobby project, available in video and in written form, made with the hope that it could be helpful to others. But any comment that could help me to improve my practice is welcome and appreciated. This is a very collectible transistor radio made in 1969 by Miver Italy, as the writing on the printed circuit board shows. The original case color was some kind of blue, but the exposure to light changed it to green. This model closely resembles other Miver transistor radios, which are still easy to find on eBay or similar platforms. There have been different TREF M runs, starting with only germanium transistors, ending using silicon transistors, and also an early integrated circuit for the audio frequency section. All these models have a receptacle made for keeping the power cord when that is not used. However, in most items the lid has been lost, like it happened to this unit. The unit under restoration is known as TREF MB, and it is based on the boards RD747B and RD522B. It may be useful to know that the model TRIF-TON is electrically very close to the TREF MB, and in fact it uses the same board RD747B together with the RD747A, which contains the differences. Online there is a schematic diagram for the model TREF MB, including the map of the two printed circuit boards. However, the drawing is not very clear, which makes even more difficult the study of a circuit that is already fairly complicated. Therefore, in the written documentation that comes along with this video, there is a redrawn schematic diagram with a better resolution, which can be enlarged at will. This radio is based on PNP germanium transistors. That implies that typically the ground or the 0-volt line would correspond to the positive of the DC power supply. However, on this radio and other similar models, there are two levels. The positive DC power supply is the ground for the audio section, but an elevated ground at -8.2 volts is what is actually marked in the circuit as ground. This can be very confusing because under the circumstances, this -8.2 volts is the voltage provided to the collectors, while one would think that the ground should be at 0 volts or close to it. A Zener diode stabilizes the -8.2 volts used for the ground on this and other Miver radio models. Here are the various sections that can be identified in the schematic diagram. Power supply. Audio frequency section. FM from the telescopic antenna to the detection. AM from the ferrite antenna to the detection. One should notice that when one band is selected, the other is turned off by disconnecting the 0-volt line. It is also important to notice that the full DC unstabilized voltage, about -14 volts, is used only in the audio section. The IF transformers and other shielded coils are labeled in the schematic diagram, and each label refers to a specific type of component. Therefore, in this case, there are two transformers labeled with the letter H because they are of the same type. This radio model has the battery compartment right at the bottom of the case, and the lid should be opened first in order to open the case. The compartment is designed to accommodate three 4.5 volts batteries, which are rarely seen nowadays, but still available on the market. Only two more screws remain to be removed for opening the back shell of the case. However, some care must be given to extracting the power cord, which, by the way, is still the original one. Also, the telescopic antenna should be desoldered in order to completely separate the back shell. The battery holder is separable too. There are only two screws holding the two boards to the front shell. This and other MIVR radio models have a unique design for the dial indicator using a celluloid tape for the purpose. Disconnecting the loudspeaker, the two boards are released completely also from the front case shell. The ferrite antenna was dislodged from its correct location, and it is appropriate to put it back in the original place. All the iron parts of this and other MIVR radio models received a very thin superficial layer of zinc. However, by now in most of the cases, that zinc turned into metal whiskers. In fact, there are online other pictures of this radio model showing the same issue. Considering that the zinc whiskers in the form of powder have invaded all the spaces, the board is sprayed with alcohol and then cleaned with an air blower. For making sure that no residues remain in between the variable capacitor blades, some Vaseline oil is used there and then blown away with the same air blower. Trying the radio using a bench loudspeaker and power supply in place of batteries, the radio just does not work. Therefore, the next step is to check and clean the switches, which happen to be distinctive components of MIVR transistor radios. contacts were silver-plated, but the silver inevitably became oxidized. For removing the black crud, a gel product for rust removal and metal polish is used. However, then the switches must be immediately washed for preventing further and worse corrosion. Here alcohol is used first, but then they are also washed with water and a common general-purpose detergent. Alcohol is used then again for removing the last residues of soapy detergent, and finally the air blower dries them out. Vaseline oil is used then for protecting the cleaned contacts. For now, the switches are not put back in place, and a simple wire with the function of a jumper is used instead, that would allow to test the radio and then to access the electrolytic capacitors more easily, which very likely will have to be replaced. Now the radio receives, but it still behaves in a strange way. The electrolytic capacitors should definitely be replaced, but before that also the switch responsible for selecting the band is removed, cleaned, washed, and temporarily replaced with jumpers. All the electrolytic capacitors are now replaced, including the one used in the FM discriminator, which will appear only at the end of this section. When the old capacitors are removed, they are also tested, in most cases showing a significantly higher value compared to their nominal capacitance. Then the radio is tested, and the result shows an improvement in the AM reception. The FM will be tested later, when the switches will be back in place. This radio contains a selenium bridge rectifier, which is still working, but maybe the occasion is good for replacing it with a silicon component. The DB107, which is rated for 1 amp and 1000 volts, fits just perfectly in the same holes on the board. Before forgetting about it, it is better to put some Vaseline oil in the volume potentiometer for ensuring a good contact between the wiper and the carbon track. It is about time to put back the original switches. Therefore, the jumpers are removed first. The radio can now be tested again, and the result is satisfactory in both bands. Considering the decent result, no alignment will be undertaken to avoid tampering with very fragile and unique coils, while that is unnecessary. There is some concern about the bridge rectifier that now would have a significantly lower voltage drop compared to the original selenium one. But even regardless of the lower voltage drop of the bridge rectifier, it seems appropriate to reduce slightly the input voltage coming from the mains. A resistor in series with the value of about 1 kilo ohms seems to be the right choice. A small prototype board is cut and prepared for hosting the dropping resistor and a fuse, which was missing in the original design. The small board should fit exactly in front of the mains switch. The board is populated with the fuse holder and two 470 ohms resistors in series, 2 watts each. The board is going to be connected directly to the mains for as long as the power plug is inserted in an outlet. Therefore, some insulation is prepared using the plastic of a small vegetable basket. The board is first connected to the input power line, and then it is covered with hot glue, on top of which goes the insulator just prepared. In the meantime, a slow blow fuse rated for 125 milliamps was installed in the fuse holder. Finally, the board is connected to the power switch. While testing the radio, powered from the mains, it is important to be careful because the added board is connected directly to the mains and there is no safety shielding for as long as the radio is outside from its plastic case. The loudspeaker is removed from the case front shell. This one, like other MIVR transistor radios, uses a celluloid tape in place of a more common dial indicator. Before cleaning the case, this tape is completely extracted and put aside. The battery compartment is washed off camera using water and a common detergent, then it is dried with the air blower. Then alcohol is used for completing the job. In a similar way proceeds the cleaning of the other plastic components of the case. The handle is extracted, but it seems safer to leave the telescopic antenna in place. Before washing the back shell, the signs of old packaging tape are removed using various detergents. Some glue residues of another type are removed using an eraser. After washing, some wall paint splashes appear on the back shell. Later they will appear also in other parts of the case. The space around the knobs on the front shell requires extra cleaning attention using a degreaser, which is rinsed again later with water. The same type of care is given to the handle, which is also slightly bent and needs to be carefully straightened. The lid for the compartment used to hold the power cord is missing, and something is studied to replace it. The plan is to use the plastic of the lid of an old rubber grommet case, which seems particularly thick and sturdy. Some Vaseline oil is applied to the external parts of the case using a small paintbrush. This is done with the hope to bring back some of the original shine. In the end, the excesses of oil are removed using a soft rug. The telescopic antenna is broken. The innermost element is missing, and the next one is truncated. A small screw is inserted in the last piece of the truncated element with the plan of using hot glue for making a small ball that would help in extending and closing the remaining elements of the antenna. Also, the ferrite antenna is fixed on its posts using hot glue. The variable capacitor drum of this radio is a specially made component designed as a gear onto which the celluloid tape used as an indicator must mesh. This gear has a slot that was not noticed during the restoration, in which the end of the celluloid tape has to be locked. Unfortunately, the geared drum is inserted here on the variable capacitor shaft, oriented in the wrong way, and only while editing this video will the slot be seen, but too late. Here it is visible what happens if the end of the celluloid tape is not correctly anchored to its gear. In the end, the tape is glued on the gear, but this is wrong, and this mistake should not be duplicated. These are the measurements for the dial indicator tape in case it were necessary to reproduce it. The loudspeaker is gently cleaned with a soft paintbrush before putting it back on the front shell of the case. The two loudspeaker wires are soldered back again. The body of the radio can now be placed on the front shell on top of the loudspeaker. The battery compartment requires some care. If it is not inserted exactly as required, the two shells of the case would not mesh correctly. During the restoration only the selenium rectifier and the electrolytic capacitors have been replaced. The radio is tested in the early evening, starting from the FM band without even extracting the telescopic antenna.
Le risorse umane sul pianeta con il software People Link su Cloud Mobile.
Adesso!
Interna all'azienda.
Il futuro è digitale. Il vento è cambiato per i veicoli commerciali.
Visita sottolinea l'ambasciatore britannico e degli USA. Ulteriore slancio nella cooperazione su difesa e energia.
Stringimi forte! 3 minuti. Tanto appuntamento per comprendere meglio.
E per il sicuro ti salvare da un eroe senza coltello. Possiamo essere invincibili.
Insieme a Stefano Conte, Daniele Belli, il programma culturale di...
Abbiamo appena notato, io dettagli e simpatizzare.
Autostrade in buona. Quello del mattino, traffico in diminuzione sulla nostra rete.
Mi piace questa versione di Bob Dylan, è la prima volta che la trovo nella scuola.
Il prossimo giornale orario fra meno di un'ora. Perché le notizie passano da noi. RTL.
Buonasera, sulla statale 219 di Piandassino c'è senso unico alternato, fuori in corso.
50.
AM band.
hímes tojáskészítő kézműves foglalkozásokkal, kirakodóvásárral, valamint